like the first time I was able to watch a show, or not a show, the event where she spoke at was an event some time ago in Nigeria, maybe like 3 or 2 years ago. I saw it on YouTube. It's the 4th annual Peace and Unity Convention. And I was like, who's this sister? Like, I'd never heard, you know, a sister like that. I was like, who's this? And then we shared it. I think I or somebody else shared it with the ICARE planning committee, and we're like, oh, we would like to bring her. And, you know, I heard other older folks watch her, and they were like, oh, they were impressed. They would love to hear her talk. Alhamdulillah, she's here. So inshallah, our speaker this morning is Sister Sheikha Maryam Lemu. Sister Lemu is an international sought-after speaker. She is an accomplished facilitator of seminars and workshops to various companies and organizations. She's a public speaker, so she does various seminars on public speaking, team building, leadership, and personal development. She's spoken in different countries, United Kingdom, also United States, Bahrain, South Africa, and all over the world. She's also shared the stage with various renowned speakers, including the famous Mufti Menk, also Sheikh Mohammed Salah, Sister Naima Roberts, and also Sheikh Bilal Phillips, and many more. She's a regular on the NTA in Nigeria, Nigerian Television Authority, with a program called Human Development Series, and also a Marriage Talks. She recently accepted an offer to host an Islamic television show on cable TV. Sheikha Lemu is also an international consultant to private schools based on her strong commitment and character development. And just to add, she also does some events with her husband, which is, I always find, you know, very educative. I've happened to listen to a couple of them, alhamdulillah, with my wife and even my mother-in-law and some older folks, and we all enjoy it. Please help me welcome our speaker for this morning, Sheikha Maryam Lemu. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Jazakumullahu khairan, ICARE, for having me on your program, on this event. I was really tripping for the question and the task that you gave the couples, and I love this so much. I love seeing couples together, coming and working on growing and improving and evolving and upgrading their relationship. And I think it's really, really important that you don't lose sight of the fact that all these efforts, all these seeds you are planting, inshallah, will bear fruits. I went through a very turbulent relationship in the early years of my marriage, but alhamdulillah, once I focused on my target, I cannot tell you how much peace of mind I have today, and how over the past, alhamdulillah, 29 years, we've been able to take the relationship to a level where, in spite of the fact that we don't take it for granted, we are enjoying the fruits of our labor. And I hope that in the house, we have people whose marriages are working. However, I do know that a lot of marriages are not working, and a lot of people try to find ways of making things work. And sometimes we end up clutching onto a straw. However, others try to grab best practices. You wouldn't be here today if your marriage wasn't important. You wouldn't be here today if your spouse wasn't worth fighting for. And hopefully, the results of all your efforts, inshallah, will bear fruit without any delay. Let me talk about the theme of this whole retreat that you've been attending, getting married and staying married. I know when I got married, and I've shared this on many platforms, I went in with the most unbelievable, ridiculous, romantic expectations because of my background, seeing a beautiful relationship in my parents. So in addition to the Mills and Boons and the Harlequin novels and all those lovely romance novels that I read, and then what I saw, I ended up setting myself up for failure. I hit the ground, and instead of running, I fell flat on my face. And for about almost 5-6 years, we went through a turbulent relationship. But as we started to evolve and get to understand each other better, we realized we were each worth fighting for. And alhamdulillah, we have committed that we're in this for life. And alhamdulillah, we've never regretted the decision to not give up on one another, because we did reach a stage where divorce was being, I know I was thinking of divorce. I just wanted a way out. And few selections in human life can ever be as sensitive and as important and essential as selecting a life partner. This selection has the fundamental potential to determine your success, your prosperity, or your misery and misfortune. In other words, marriage can make or break us. And I know I used to tell people who are having issues, I say, do you get that feeling when you're quarreling with your spouse and you just have the lousiest day? You go to work and you just have a rough day. Because the peace of mind you have when your home is at peace, when there is tranquility in the home, is something that you cannot describe other than Allah's rahmah, Allah's blessing on your relationship. So I describe marriage as two unique individuals who come together to complement one another, who guide and encourage each other to get closer to their maker, who grow together in their God consciousness, and who fear offending Allah. Two unique individuals who help and support each other to develop emotionally, intellectually, socially, and in service to humanity. You are meant to fulfill each other's needs, wants, and fantasies. You're meant to be garments for one another. We are meant to protect each other's dignity and look out for each other's best interests. We are meant to feel emotionally safe and physically safe around our partner. And together we get to build a nurturing environment where there is love, where we feel safe at home, in a climate and a culture where each of us gets to thrive and achieve our highest calling. With you and your partner, you are meant to not have any secrets between each other. In other words, you're each other's confidants. You get to know each other better than anyone else in the world. You get to see each other during the good, the bad, and the ugly times. You get to be your true self around your partner. Marriage to me is about give and take, with mutual fulfillment and mutual satisfaction. And I highlight and I underline and I emphasize the mutual, because you are living with your companion, your buddy, your mate, your best friend, and your lover. You get to grow all together and go on this lifelong adventure of self-discovery and personal evolution. The one whose soul you get to fall in love with whom the steady burning embers of true love remain constant long after the passion has died down. Yes, even if gravity sets in, even if the wrinkles and the crow's feet setting, you are still in love with that person's soul. Whenever you look at them, you feel contentment in your heart because you are with the one that Allah created just for you. Now, as I was describing what I believe marriage is, I know some were listening to me and like, what is she talking about? How many witnessed such a beautiful relationship? And you can just put it down in the comment section. Some had the privilege of witnessing that kind of relationship. And I was privileged to see my parents for the 50 years while my mom was still alive, to have experienced such a beautiful relationship and modeled it for us. And alhamdulillah, what I have today is exactly what I described to you. After 29 years of hard work, of sacrifice, but commitment. And I am sure when I was describing this marriage, what it's meant to be, some were thinking, not in my home. What we have is disrespect. We have shouting matches going on. We have putting each other down, feeling trapped. I feel broken or abused in this relationship. I feel abused emotionally or physically or psychologically or economically or sexually abused. I feel contempt towards my spouse. I feel disgust. I feel betrayal. I feel disappointment. In fact, we have become managers. We're just managing each other. We're more like roommates. In my marriage, we have manipulation, we have game playing and politics, struggle for power. Someone is flexing their muscle, showing off that they have economic superiority or spiritual superiority or intellectual superiority. I mean, the list goes on in what kind of realities exist in a lot of marriages today. And I pray nobody here in the house feels or relates with what I've said. But the big question I often ask is, why are marriages like that today? If Allah has prescribed marriage with words like love and mercy that He has put in our hearts, and that we are meant to dwell in peace and tranquility and lounge in happiness and contentment, and nowhere did He say marriage was about managing one another or disrespect or self-sacrifice or oppression, when even in Islam, oppression is described as worse than slaughter. Why is it so hard for marriages to work today? Why are so many marriages not working compared to those that are working? Why are some couples ready to commit 110% to their marriages while others don't? Why does love and mercy exist in some homes, some marriages, while in many marriages that doesn't even feature? And how do things get so bad? How do things get so low? What I find interesting is how most people take their religious rituals more seriously than their marriage, like their prayers, like fasting, like sadaqah, like the non-obligatory, visiting the sick, the sunnah look, the hijabi look, the memorization of the Quran, the extra nawafils, extra zikr, the extra extras. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm in no way downplaying that, but all those things and more that I describe fall into just half of our faith, when fulfilling our obligations to our spouse completes the other half. Imagine, all the other acts of ibadah are just half. And many of us know more about the other acts of ibadah, whether it's fasting or what we're supposed to do when we go for Hajj or how we are supposed to recite, compared to how much research they do when it comes to this area of marriage. So it's not the act of getting married that fulfills half our faith. It is fulfilling our obligations to our spouse that completes half our faith. Now, you would think that's what everybody is rushing to. Like, God, let me get this half in the bank so that I can now face the other half. I would think that's what we would all be struggling towards, because that takes care of half. And then the added bonus, if we get that half in order, it brings true happiness and peace of mind, which is something no money in the world can ever give us. There is nothing like having peace of mind. And a good marriage gives you this and even more, because fulfilling your obligations to your spouse is the foundation for a peaceful home. It is the foundation of having a happy spouse who will most likely eagerly satisfy all your needs, all your wants, and all your fantasies. Because amongst the obligations we owe our spouse is a halal relationship. And by fulfilling one's intimacy needs, it'll bring down the rate of infidelity committed by both spouses, which has gone on the rise with both genders, which will also bring down the rate of sexual frustration in any relationship, again by both spouses, which will reduce the rate of spouses turning to pornography and masturbation, which is on the rise, especially amongst married women. And another obligation in Islam that we owe our spouse, if we fulfill our obligations to our spouse, is we owe our spouse respect. We owe them love. We owe them kindness. We're going to have to answer to Allah if we don't show those things to our spouse. Now, any normal human being in their correct mind that receives this respect, love, and kindness responds in kind. Even the Prophet ﷺ said that the heart has been created in a way that it loves those who show kindness towards it and dislike those who cause it pain. Now, when I think about how badly many of us are behaving in our marriages today, I worry about what we're going to go and say to our Maker, how we're going to answer to Him for what we did or what we didn't do. What happened to the love and mercy that He said He has placed in our hearts, not that He's going to place in our hearts? I often say there is no miracle lecture that we will attend that will fix our marriages. There is no dua, fast, prayer, sadaqah, or babalawo that will fix our marriages if we do not tie our camel. The change that we have to do lies within us. We have to start looking in the mirror and asking, what am I doing right? What am I not doing? Or what do I need to do differently to make my marriage work? Like I said, if we could only focus on starting by fulfilling our obligations to our marriage, to our spouse, obligations in marriage to our spouse, that is the foundation of a healthy relationship. Now, I was asked to talk on this theme, getting married, staying married. And I shared a general overview of what a lot of marriages look like today and the root cause of why a lot of marriages don't work. And I go back to the basics, just fulfill your obligations. Now, let me talk about what worked for us and how we were able to, and alhamdulillah, and inshallah, we will continue to make our marriage work so we stay together. Especially, like I said, after we hit rock bottom. And for those who are where we were, who want their marriages to work, who are ready to make sacrifices and make some changes and are ready to commit, I promise you, inshallah, if you add to what you're already doing, I promise you, inshallah, you will see a tremendous improvement in a positive way in how you relate with your spouse and the love and mercy you will start to have for each other. And for those whose marriages are thriving, who are here to add to what they are already doing, I'm going to share our best practices with you. So let me share with you what I believe is the formula for having a great relationship with your spouse. And it requires both of you committing 110% to making it work. But I promise you the results is going to, inshallah, be happiness, fulfillment, and contentment with one another and the relationship. So regardless of if you are newlyweds or you've been married 30 years or over, the first tip, which I've already shared, is know your rights and know your obligations to your spouse and fulfill them, because ignorance is not an excuse. We are each going to have to answer to Allah for what we did or what we didn't do in our relationships. Now, a lot of us, when we first get married, we go through marriage shock, that euphoric state where we are used to hearing sweet nothings and we gaze into each other's eyes. We get to know that that doesn't last, especially when the masks come off and we get to see our spouse as they are without them having to put their best foot forward to impress us. So I pray to God that if you were both sincere during courtship, you are not in for any surprises. Because the thing is, when you first get married, that shock often comes from the fact that you realize you are two totally different human beings whom before you got married, you were thinking alike, you were saying the right thing to each other. You weren't having the kind of conflict that will feature in marriage. But once you are committed, two totally different human beings have to come together and live together. And it takes time to adjust, to synergize. For my husband and I, it took us about 5 to 6 years. For some, it's much longer. This is where one needs a lot of patience. One needs a lot of talking and negotiating. In addition to adjusting to the different personalities, you have to adjust to the different cultures, depending on where you're from. And even if you're from the same cultural background, you come up from different homes where your upbringing is different. And it's almost impossible that you won't have clashes in that area. Different family traditions, or you grew up in a totally different society. My husband had spent about 20 years in the States, and I was here in Nigeria, though I traveled to the UK for holidays. But we grew up with totally different backgrounds, even though he started up until high school in Nigeria. But often we are too in love during the courtship period to be aware that there's trouble ahead that we need to discuss before we commit. Not only discuss, agree on certain things. Some of the challenges we face is our communication style, how we settle our differences, how we fight, how we raise our children, how we practice our faith, how we spend money, and so on and so forth. For many of us, our best model was how we saw our parents relate with each other, what we grew up seeing. So whose style is right and whose method is going to be applied? That sometimes is an issue of contention and causes a lot of conflict and fights. But the first thing we have to do is recognize that we're both on the same side, the side of the relationship. And no matter what, we have to develop a culture of win-win. We always think about the relationship first, and that there is mutual satisfaction that has to be achieved from whatever it is. This requires sitting together, talking, and negotiating. No one can say my style is better. This is definitely the root of a lot of troubles. But you have to make it the sum of your best qualities. You have to have an open mind when you sit to discuss. So which style are we going to apply? Which methodology of raising children worked best? You have to discuss the pros and cons, but you have to sit and discuss. It also requires us to put our egos aside and focus on the big picture, the side of the relationship, because both of you have to feel that you matter, that your opinion counts, that you're relevant. And then there needs to be some compromise, some give and take. It's all about the give and take, both equally putting in and getting something good out of it, mutual fulfillment. Again, no one should take the high road and say, my style is better. If you want to have a healthy relationship, it requires both of you discussing. Early on, it's important in the relationship to set marriage goals. And if you didn't, this is a good day to start. Always, always keep your eye on the big picture and make sure you continue to evolve and upgrade. Keep your eye on the target and identify that sometimes there are things you witnessed growing up that were not good. And be careful assuming that, oh, this worked for us at home. You think it worked because our parents were very good at covering their true feelings. So you do need to recognize the things you didn't like so you don't bring them in and feel, oh, that's how I was raised. But you have to make sure you do not replicate in your home what you saw that was unpleasant. And sometimes your spouse's method may actually be the better one. You have to have an open mind. Because I always emphasize, and I talk about this a lot these days, is sometimes our parents get it wrong. They are as human as we are and as fallible as we are. And sometimes their model was wrong. And they only replicated in their homes with their spouses, with their children, what they saw, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So you do need to ask yourself, and I'd ask you to take a moment and ask your spouse, what do you think about my method when it comes to this, that, conflict, everything you can think of that are issues that are of deep concern to you, that are important, that are worth fighting for? What do you think about my method? Because I always emphasize it's about the beholder. It's not about you. A lot of us focus on how we want things. But at the end of the day, we got married to someone else for a reason, and there has to be a win-win. And if what we are doing is not going down well with the beholder, with our life partner, then we do need to make some adjustments. Ask yourself, but also ask your partner, am I doing things that are not pleasant to you, that are not healthy, or that you feel I should do differently? And you do need to be honest with yourself. Am I replicating exactly what I saw just because that was the only model I had? And am I okay with my children replicating what they see between me and my spouse today? Am I okay with them just copy and pasting that in their future relationships? Why? Because we are copying what our parents modeled. Our children are copying what we are modeling. We cannot tell our children what an ideal relationship is meant to look like. We have to model it. They learn based on what they see. And we are going to have to answer to Allah for the example we set for them. Next thing on getting married and staying married, it's important not to impose, not to allow anyone to impose their family traditions on yours. You have to create your own culture. And sometimes we get married and we just go with the flow. I talk about that when it comes to popping children. Often 9 months after we get married, we start to pop these kids like rabbits without any real goals and plans. And then we start having conflict because we never discussed methodology of raising the children in the first place. But you have to create a marriage culture, but you also have to create boundaries. You have to set boundaries and protect each other from your loved ones, protect each other from your relatives and your friends, because they are destroying marriages today. My husband told his family when we got married that during the nikah, it was his name that was called, not theirs. And none of them have any right over me, and they cannot tell me what to do. And they should never interfere in our relationship. If he needs help, he will ask for it. This was something he did very, very early on. And then I had to do the same. I come from a very close-knit home. We're just two, my brother and I, and then my mom and dad. And so we were very, very close. But I had to set boundaries. I had to let them know, you can't just charge and come just visit Maryam at any time. You have to call and ask if it's okay. It was very difficult. But if you have not done this, ask your spouse, are my family members making you miserable? This is really uncomfortable to do, but we have to do this if we want to move forward. We have to do this if we want our marriages to work, if we want to bring conflict down and issues of contention. But you're going to have to use tact, especially if you've already allowed people to seep into the relationship and feel they have a stake, they have a say in the relationship. But I ask you, ask your spouse if they are okay with the relationship they have today with your relatives and friends. Because amongst the obligations in Islam we owe each other is to be protectors, to be shields for one another. And another obligation is we do not admit, and this is for the woman, you do not admit someone into the home that your spouse dislikes. This is about our relationship with Allah, not with our family. Our marriage is about our relationship with Allah, and we will answer to Him if we do not shield or protect our spouse. I am sorry, honestly, I know this is very unpleasant. And by raising it, I know it's going to cause a lot of friction because it may be something that you've been sweeping under the rug. But sometimes rocking the boat is important. Change isn't easy. But I just feel it's important we bring issues out that matter. We have to address what matters most. And your spouse's peace of mind and happiness is important. And you are the one in the position that who can protect them and help them. If not, then why are we here? The trouble is many want things to get better, but don't want to do the dirty work. Like I said, there is no miracle lecture or potion we will take that will make our marriages work or strengthen the bond between us and our spouse. We have to take charge of this area. We have to just do it. As hard as it may be, as unpleasant as it may be, as painful as it can be. Sometimes you find relatives break away from you because of that. But guess what? If they do not want to support what you are trying to do, they are not good for you. They are not good for your relationship. They are unhealthy for your relationship. If they do not wish well for you and your marriage, your happiness, they are not worth fighting for. And I mean, it doesn't matter who it is. You personally can maintain a healthy relationship with your loved ones, but let them not set foot in areas that you are meant to be the shield to protect your spouse on. We have to sometimes cut off ties, and you will be happier for it, and you will have more peace of mind. So if you want change, this is a perfect time to start. There's no better time than today. Next, and I share this in many of my lectures because to me this is the most important area that helped transform our relationship, is to come up with a code of conduct together. Some may already have. These are rules that you promise each other you will always observe and always fulfill. And I will quickly go through mine, some of mine with my husband. The first is faith and spirituality, that we would do acts of ibadah together and we'd make efforts to bring each other closer to our Maker. So we pray together. When he fasts, he often encourages me. He fasts more than I do. He encourages me to join him in fasting. But we sit and do zikr together in the garden. When we go for walks, we are often making a dua, having a discussion though, things to bring us closer to our Maker. And we do the same with our children. Then we pray for each other. We pray for the success of our marriage. We pray for each other's success. So faith and spirituality, holding on tight to Allah's rope, is number one for us as our pillar, the foundation of our relationship. The next is fidelity and loyalty and contentment, that we will always be loyal to each other. I promise you, I will never cheat on you. I will never commit zina. That is a promise we've made to one another. And I will always appreciate this gift that Allah has given me. And I say it shamelessly everywhere I go, that I'm married to my boyfriend for life. And I still flirt with him as if we just got married or we are still courting. So looking for the best, most endearing qualities in your spouse is so important. And being content with what you went into in the presence of your maker. So for us, that's number 2. The third is mutual respect. No matter how angry or upset I am, I will never disrespect you. I will never dishonor you. I will always speak to you with dignity. You can't be fighting with each other, disrespecting one another, denigrating each other, dishonoring, and expect love and mercy to exist. So that code of conduct of respect, good adab in a relationship is so important. You can't be unfaithful. You can't have feelings of contempt or neglect your spouse and expect peace to exist. No marriage can function normally if any of these things feature. It's simply impossible. The next code of conduct is trust. That I trust you to always be there for me. I trust you to make excuses for me. I trust you that you will always tell me what's going on in your life. So we have a code of conduct of no secrets. I've shared this before, he's shared it before, that we have no passwords. We don't lock our phones. He gives me his ATM card. I use it as I please, although I don't abuse it. But I know his PIN codes, he knows mine. We never care to ask how much are you making, or things like that. But we are very transparent and open. I always tell people, if you don't want Saeed to know, don't tell me. So he knows that I download whatever goes on in my day, and he does the same. So we talk a lot, but the most important thing is no secrets. It just gives us peace of mind. And when it comes to the children, again, no secrets. We run a school, and I see the kind of damage that happens when a parent doesn't involve the other spouse. These kids get away with so much, and after they are messed up, eventually the other spouse gets to find out and a lot of trouble happens. But it takes both of you to raise your children, and making sure you don't hide anything that the child is doing because you are afraid of how your spouse will react is such a dangerous thing. Eventually, the child will either go astray and be beyond your control, or when your spouse finds out, it becomes a big issue of contention. Another area we have as a code of conduct is mutual growth, having mutual interests, making sure we always have something in common to do and talk about. So we always make sure we grow together. When I'm doing a lot of online courses, I often share certain ones with him. When he's reading a book, he shares it with me. And then having common interests. You want to make sure that your spouse's number one recreation involves you. My husband loved to play tennis, and he would go to the tennis court to play, even with total strangers. I got to learn how to play tennis, and we had a talk yesterday with Naima Roberts where he shared. He taught me how to play tennis, and I started whooping his butt on the court. But these are things that are important, that you need to make sure you're always on the same page, that there's no intellectual gap between you and your spouse. Otherwise, you get to a stage where you don't have something to talk about. My husband loves the news. I made it a point to learn to sit and listen to world news, world politics, so we can have an intellectual discussion on those topics. So always make sure you have something in common. I'm just sharing what worked for me. I know you're going to come up with your own unique code of conduct, but these are some of our best practices. If you don't have something in common with your spouse, if you don't have shared interests, you run the high risk of permitting them to go outside to fulfill or find somebody who's going to share that thing with them. So try and always have something in common. And this applies to both of you. And then another code of conduct is we will understand each other's love languages and basic human needs. If you don't know this, and I'm sure you know this, the book by John Gray and the book by Anthony Robbins, you can go on YouTube, watch the videos on it, or TED Talk, or go and Google it, or get the Audible on it, or read the book. It has transformed marriages. And then men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Understanding how each spouse, each gender thinks. These are so important. Learning your spouse's love language and the order of what they consider to be a correct deposit is so important. because you may be depositing Naira and they wanted euros. What you thought was what they needed may be something totally different. There's this lady I was counseling who said, I have done everything. You know, men, it's sex. Everything is sex. I have swung from the chandeliers. I have pulled out all the stops, every stunt in the book. And he doesn't seem to be, it's like I'm dialing the wrong number. So I went through the 5 love languages to try and check off one by one what to her is important to her spouse. And as we started going through, we settled on gifts. For her spouse, she actually got one of those aha or bingo moments where she got to realize that she's just been depositing in the wrong currency. And the same applies to the women. Make sure if you have not expressed it to your spouse, let them know so they can satisfy you. And for the men, a lot of men are non-expressive and sometimes they don't even know. But talk about this together. You do need to spend time identifying each other's love language and the order, which one is number 1, number 2, and so on. So make sure you deposit in the correct currency and always make sure you grow and evolve. Evolve physically, evolve socially, evolve intellectually, evolve economically, and in service to others. These are 5 areas that are so important that you grow in the same direction. Make sure you keep similar circle of friends that also have or value what family means, value and respect the institution of marriage. Then another code of conduct is that we will always look good and sexy for one another, that we will always smell good. Both of us shower twice a day. It's just a habit because we love to smell good for one another. So whatever is a deposit for you, when it comes to looking good, you always want to make sure you look attractive for one another. Do shakara for each other. Arrange yourself, as they say. Arrange yourself even if you're not going out. Because amongst the obligations you owe your spouse in Islam that you're going to have to answer to Allah for is a halal relationship. So be adventurous. Don't let intimacy be a chore. Boredom is a recipe for disaster. Have fun. And both of you are meant to be equally satisfied in the bedroom area. And then another area we focus on as our code of conduct is that we are each other's cheerleader. Let your spouse know that they matter the most to you. Don't let them get that attention from somebody outside. That is another recipe for disaster. Because if needs are not being met in the home, the risk for them to go and search for outside fulfillment begins. Then in addition to feeding each other's spirit, we show appreciation and gratitude for the littlest things. That's another code of conduct, that we will say thank you. We will be helpful. We will be supportive. And then let your spouse always look forward to coming home to you. Now, one of the last, and I'm not going to go through all, like I say, is commitment for life mindset, that we are in this for the long haul. So having the right mindset is so important and can transform your relationship. So what is your marriage mindset? One thing I know for sure is that that marriage mindset can make or break your relationship, your attitude towards your marriage and towards your spouse, how you see them, how you describe them, how you describe your marriage. Many of us can be very cynical, and what we focus on expands. So if we see the gloom and doom and focus on the negative, that's what will grow. How would you describe your marriage today? Is it like a war zone where everybody is in fight mode? You give no space at all. There's no generosity, no compassion. You go for blood. You show no weakness. Or is your marriage like politics, where there's a struggle for power and influence? There's always playing of games, manipulation, sweet talks, factions. Yes, like politics. You get the children to side with you, or the in-laws, or the relatives, friends to feel and empathize with you. Or is your marriage like a hotel, where you give something, but you're not fully committed? You go elsewhere when you please, and you come back when you please. There's no loyalty, no fidelity. I come across this a lot when I do couples counseling. Or is your marriage like a prison where you feel trapped? You feel you have no choice. You feel no independence. You want to get out, but you feel stuck, most often because of the children, or because you don't want to have to go back to your family, or your status, you may lose that, or the stigma that you've come home, or the financial insecurity you may have, or you will not be married anymore. This is also a very common scenario. Or is your marriage like a roundabout where you just exist? Your marriage, like a roundabout, is a marriage where there is a roundabout with no exit. You're more like roommates. You are just there. You don't quarrel. You both are just going with the flow. Everybody's just doing their own thing. You've accepted each other. You are not struggling for anything in the relationship, and you're not struggling to get out. You have no expectations. It's just convenient. In other words, you've become more like managers. You are managing each other. You find this a lot, especially in couples who've been married for a long time, where they feel they've tried everything in the book to make their marriages work, but out is not an option. I describe this like two ships sailing in the dark with no compass. So you have no goals, no compass for your marriage, no expectations. Or is your marriage like a thriving garden where it's like a team sport? You're both having fun. There's mutual commitment. You're both on the same side. You're gaining, you're giving, you're growing. You're guarding your marriage jealously, like you put a fence around your garden, but you are content. Or is your marriage a bit of almost everything I mentioned? In which state is your marriage today, and in which state is your marriage mindset? So now that you've identified the state of your marriage, it's time to lay down your arms and step back from the war zone if your marriage is like a war zone. You can't be here today if you didn't want to find out if there's something missing or something you need to do differently. And if you are in the campaign hall, you need to throw away the ballot boxes if your marriage is like politics. There is no win and lose in a successful marriage. For those who are still in the hotel car park, this is the best hotel in the world. Stop shopping for cheap motels. It may be the most expensive, the most high maintenance, but the luxuries are so worth fighting for. And for those on the roundabout with no exit, with no expectation, those who have lowered the standard that they had for their marriage, take the next exit off the roundabout and take the road back to where you started, why you got married in the first place. So think about your marriage, think about your spouse. Since you are most likely together as a couple, I'd like you to ask your spouse, why did you get married to me? And I'll take a second and ask you to ask your spouse. If your spouse is not with you, just take down this question, because I would love for you to find time as soon as possible. If you can grab them today, do so. If they are far away, have a Zoom with them and ask them this question: why did you get married to me? And then tell your spouse what their endearing qualities are. What are the best qualities that your spouse has? What is it you fell in love with? So the first question is, why did I marry you? The second is, what are your endearing qualities? The third is, what did I fall in love with? Now, I know some may be going through what I went through, maybe even worse. It's probably possible that it has gotten nasty, or you've reached the stage where divorce has been threatened, spoken about, or even seriously contemplated. Or there's been emotional, psychological, physical, or financial harm done, trust destroyed, words uttered that can't be taken back. I'd like to ask you, for the sake of Allah, to please press pause. Now, one thing I learned is that when there's trouble, I needed to put my ego aside and look at the role I played in making things the way it is today. Is there something I missed early on? Maybe before I even got married to my spouse, was I too in love to see or address certain issues? Often there are warning signs that are given to us, which we feel, oh, I'll deal with that. I'll cross that bridge when I get there. I'll fix them after the marriage. During my premarital talks, I always warn couples to don't ever marry a potential or a work in progress. But that's too late now, right? But you need to also ask, is there any excess baggage that you are carrying or your spouse is carrying in scars or unhealed wounds that is affecting the relationship in a negative way? things you experienced growing up, or things you witnessed, or maybe what your spouse went through? Have you been able to identify if that is the root cause? I had no idea why my husband was so super sensitive when we first got married. I grew up in a very laid back home. Like I said, we didn't see fights. But my husband was just, he would snap so quickly. He was super sensitive. I'd say something small and he would brood or shut down, and I could not understand. It was over the years as I started to gain trust that he started to open up and share what experiences he went through growing up, unpleasant experiences that shaped the way he thought, the way he reacted. And it's still a work in progress. We all have our flaws that we have confided in each other in, and we are working on it. But it's helped us understand each other better and helped each other heal. But like I said, the first thing is you have to ask yourself sincerely, what role did you play to make things the way it is today? It's easy to look outwards and point fingers. There's this metaphor in the business world where they say we should always look in the mirror when something goes wrong and look out of the window when things go right. We look out of the window to look for things to praise, who to praise. And that's when you look out of the window and compliment your spouse when they do well. But when things go wrong, you need to do the introspect. Whatever the nature of the cracks in your relationship, as long as they're not being filled in, you need to ask, what is it about me that's keeping those cracks open? And then what am I doing or what am I not doing to make things worse? Don't focus on who started it. Another code of conduct is effective communication. Everything I've mentioned so far requires that. And sometimes due to cultural differences, different backgrounds, different experiences we had or what we saw growing up, communication becomes very difficult. For me, that was our biggest problem when we got married. I didn't know how to talk. My husband would say to me in our language, we're both from the same tribe, and he would say, in my language, he'd say, Maryam, wama gaga. Maryam, you don't know how to talk, because I just blurted things out as they came to my mind. And being super sensitive, it caused a lot of problems. So the method you quarrel, timing was important. How you resolve conflict. This is something that requires you to sit down and talk. What is the best method? He would walk through the door and there I was with my weapon of mass destruction, bombarding him with everything that was bothering me, because for me, I couldn't go to sleep with a heavy heart. That's how I grew up, because I never saw this. And he would say, Maryam, back off. He'd say, Maryam, give me time. I don't want to say anything I would regret. And guess what? I would say, no, say it. Don't worry, you won't regret it. And boy, did I regret. So this is something that is so important. I had to go on YouTube, I had to go on Google, I had to read books, I had to take online courses on effective communication and effective listening. And conflict resolution, the art of war. I mean, literally, I pulled out all the stops to try and get this right, because it was a huge problem. And we learn how to speak. When we're in school, we're taught public speaking and the rest of it, but not how to listen. And I had to learn to be an effective listener. And while communicating, it's important you are ready to accept feedback with grace and with dignity. This was, I think, the biggest, most important turning point in our relationship when we had reached bottom, when I sat my husband down and I asked him this key question. What is it about me you don't like that you want me to change? What is it about me you like that you want me to continue? And what am I not doing right now that you'd like to see me do? And I ask you to ask your spouse the same question. Now, due to time, we can't wait for you to finish that, but maybe during Q&A, we can discuss it more. But ask your spouse those 3 questions. It is so important, and be ready to take notes. Someone like me, I had a big mouth, I would interrupt. But this time, when the option was divorce, I had to keep my big mouth shut and take down notes. And I listened to understand. If I asked any question, it was clarifying questions so that I really understood what he meant, where he was coming from. This was a huge turning point. Alhamdulillah, he asked me to do the same with him. But we both learned to become more self-aware and be very real with ourselves. I am very ruthless with myself when it comes to my bad habits, and I'm constantly asking him for feedback. A few months ago during lockdown, I asked him, how can I make you happier? And to my surprise, about a month and a half ago, he did the same with me. He didn't ask me to do the same then, but about a month and a half ago, he sat me down. He said, Maryam, come. And he was sitting on the couch. He switched off the TV. He said, sit here. He asked me, how can I make you happier? And this is another question you should ask your spouse. So I would like you to ask yourself a few questions. Number one, I would want you to ask yourself sincerely, would you want to be married to you the way you are today, the way you're relating with your spouse? Would you picture yourself in your spouse's shoes? And would you want to be the one married to you with all your habits? And are you attractive, both inside and out? Yes, the out will eventually fall apart. Gravity will set in, wrinkles will set in. But what about the in? Are you attractive both inside and out? Is your character attractive? Do you do the purification of your heart and soul? Are you a good person to be around? I'd like you to ask yourself these questions, but I'd like you to also ask your spouse these questions. Ask your spouse, am I a pleasure to be around? Ask your spouse, in what way do you add value to the relationship? Not, do I add value to the relationship? No, in what way do you add value to the relationship? In what way do I uplift your spirits? In what way am I encouraging of you, if I am at all? Ask your spouse, who's your biggest cheerleader? Who's the captain of your supporters club? These are uncomfortable questions because you don't know what you're going to get. And then ask your spouse, do I show enough appreciation for even the littlest things? And then ask them, do I feed your spirit? Then another question, and I know this is being recorded, so hopefully, because I have to go through it fast. Do you look forward to coming home to me? Do you look forward to coming home to me? Then ask yourself this question. Are you committed for life to this relationship? Do you have an I'm in this for life? You have to sit down without delay and talk to your spouse and over talk. And alhamdulillah, since this event started, you've had a lot of, sit down and talk heart to heart. And I'm sure some are quite unpleasant. Going through apology, which is the session you had just before I came on, is a very raw area. Because sometimes your apology may not even be accepted. Why? Because the wounds are deep. The scars hurt so much. But the beginning is to start talking, to sit down and start the process. Inshallah, you will see the results if you are sincere in your intentions. But you have to sit and talk and over talk and agree on having a code of conduct and rules. These are just some of the non-negotiables and the constants that my husband and I have with each other. And like I said, we have so much more. We have added social media, the use of devices to our list now, because a lot of us today give the unseen more priority. We give strangers more attention than the person whom we're supposed to spend the rest of our lives with. But don't be surprised that if you are having problems today, these issues that I have already raised are some of the causes of friction. They haven't been addressed. No one has ever complained that there's too much communication in their marriage, so talk and over talk. We wrote a checklist of things we would do for variety in the relationship to prevent stagnation. And we research a lot and we talk about it. Great fun stuff to do, especially for intimacy. How to make each other feel special, wanted. So we buy a lot of books on those topics. We go online and research it. But you have to understand your spouse's unique needs, wants, and fantasies, and you have to do everything in your power to fulfill it. But you also have to share. Observe what brings them pleasure and improve upon it, like my father always says. But be ready to do anything halal to make sure you satisfy your spouse's needs, and always learn to reinvent yourself and be original. And I'm talking to both spouses in here. Don't ever make intimacy a formality. Be flirtatious with each other. And don't ever make it a bargaining chip. Don't deprive your spouse, especially of that area. You run the risk of sending them outside for fulfillment. Make yourself each other's priority. We check on each other during the day. I talk about my husband as somebody who stalks me, because wallahi, he calls me no less than about 4 to 5 times during the day. What I prefer to do, I just record a video message and I send it out to him, just to tell him ask him how he's doing, and just to let him know he's top of my mind. We have made each other's priority. Because if your spouse is at peace, you will be at peace. And inshallah, your children will be at peace. Your family will be at peace, and you will achieve peace and tranquility. So be as unpredictable as possible, but also have constants, routines. Boredom is a recipe for disaster in any relationship, but it's always good to develop your own culture and routines and guard it jealously. We have our date nights, we have our family days, certain things that we always observe, even if it is once a month. And then once in a while, when it comes to intimacy, I didn't want to forget this, try different places and different times. Don't ever maintain routines, but be sensible and learn about sexting, but make sure you delete, because you never know who your phone is gonna fall in the hands of. And then write each other notes, special things that keep letting the other person know they matter, and compliment often. Wallahi, you can't compliment enough, but make sure it is sincere and be specific. Don't ever take each other for granted. Then pray for each other, pray for the success of your marriage, pray for one another. And in conclusion, just remember, no matter how many years you've been married, people change, people grow, people evolve. Our needs change. That's why constant feedback is so important, and constant introspect, looking in the mirror. Always seek to understand your spouse better and accommodate one another, as long as those changes are healthy for the relationship. But no matter what happens, never lose sight of that endearing quality I talked about discussing with your spouse, what you fell in love with. Sometimes the fights can get so hot, the temperature can rise, but never lose sight of who you married and why you got married to that person. If the person you fell in love with has changed or has disappeared, find them and bring them back. They didn't disappear by accident. Most likely you may have chased them away. You need to look within. The reality is, whatever the state or the nature of your marriage that may be today, if it is great, ask yourself, how did it get that way? What did you do to contribute to make it that way? Are you both putting in, or is the spouse making it great? And if it isn't great, ask, what did I do wrong? Not what did they do wrong? How did I contribute to what is happening today? The big question is, are you ready to open a new chapter? Even if your marriage is amazing today, are you ready to open a new chapter, to elevate it to another level? But if both parties are committed to the relationship, you get out of marriage what you put in, if you are both committed. May Allah strengthen the bond between you and your spouse. May what you hope to achieve when you signed up for this great, fantastic event, may Allah put His barakah in it. May you achieve peace of mind, tranquility, contentment in your hearts. May you always find each other's company to be the best company in the world after Allah. May Allah bless your union. May Allah strengthen the bond. Jazakumullahu khairan. ICARE for having me join this event. I am honored. I am humbled. It is a pleasure. I salute you, because I think we need more of this. So may it be a witness for you in the life to come, and for everybody in the house. May you reap the rewards and the fruits of your labor, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan.
Wa iyaakum. Jazakumullahu khairan again, sister. Woo, wonderful session. I was just taking notes, and I know others were doing the same. Alhamdulillah, we thank you again for accepting to attend ICARE and give us this beautiful and wonderful session. I know I have learned, my wife also, we both learned. We were just taking notes, and I know others were doing the same. So inshallah, we will go into the Q&A session, and I know people are ready to go. I'm sure people are ready to go. Please, brothers and sisters, if you have questions for Sister Lemu, please use the raise your hand feature. I think we explained how to do that yesterday. It's right there. When you click on the participants, you look for your name and just click where it says raise hand. Okay, inshallah, that's how we're going to do. So please, if you have questions, use that, and I'll be right now. Sister Lemu, you're being sought after everywhere. Everybody wants you to come. So inshallah, I know we'll be getting in touch officially. We'll be getting in touch. So the first question that I would like to ask before others are ready to go is when we do one of those private sessions you asked us to do, for example, when we look in the mirror, what type of questions do you think would be easier, to ask ourselves to evaluate, level of our relationship? What kind of how should we begin that session, inshallah?
Well, it's a very straight talk. I would ask you to make dua upon dua beforehand, because you need lots of it. What should you do before you start is tell yourself, I'm not going to be reactive. I think that is so important. I'm not going to be reactive. And picture the end goal. What are you trying to achieve? Obviously, to strengthen the relationship. Like I said, if things are good, you want it to be better. So it's important you have that mindset, put your ego aside, literally lock it up, and be ready to take notes. And then ask yourself, the first question, like I said, is, what am I doing wrong? What would you like me to do differently? Why don't I put it that way if you don't want to, if you feel it's too confrontational to say, what am I doing wrong? So what do you want me to do differently? And what am I doing right that you'd like me to improve upon? And what am I not doing at all that you want me to start? However, I listed some of the other questions you can ask, which you can choose to break up into different segments, because you want to take this sometimes bite-sized, because hearing the raw truth may be a bit hard. Some people feel, their self-esteem is shattered when they hear feedback about themselves, because they've had this image of their mind of what a reality is, and the beholder is saying, no, sorry, wrong number, it's something else. So you need to ask this question, and then other things based on your observations. You may notice something about your spouse. I noticed certain things changed about you, but you have to look within and ask yourself, when did the change begin? Like I said, have they always been that way? If they aren't, then what's changed? Are you ready to look within and see, is it something I did, or is it something I stopped doing? But you do need to creatively, tactfully try and pull that out so that you are both ready to move to the next level of your relationship. But you know your own unique relationship and what you really want out of it. So those are the guiding questions that you will use. But it's important, number one, are you a pleasure to be around? Does your spouse look forward to coming home to you? I mean, those two questions. I remember my husband said he didn't look forward to coming home to me. I was shattered and devastated. And that was when I decided to ask for feedback, because I needed to know, okay, why not? And then, of course, the boom, 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 the choo-choo-choo-choo, as he calls it, I just talked too much, and wrong timing, all those things came in. And that's when I realized I need to guard my tongue. And I remember just the day before I left home, when I was getting married, I was 18 years old. My father remembers me as I had a big mouth. And it's because of my jaga jaga, yeah, follow, mumu personality that he said, you are not going to university because I know you're going to go astray. So he said, you're going to get a husband, you're going to get married, then you continue your life after that. And wallahi, it was the best decision he took on my behalf. And I keep praying to Allah to bless him for that. But the day before I got married, my father did this to me. He said, watch your tongue. And unfortunately, I didn't understand until now. So.
Jazakallah khair for that. So I'm going to call on the first person to ask question, Brother Marshall. Please go ahead, sir.
So Maryam, thank you very much for that wonderful presentation, right? We really, really enjoyed it. My wife and I, we were talking about it, as you are going through the list. My wife used to have a big mouth too, right? Big mouth, right? So, but maybe she still has some. So from your presentation, it looks like you have controlled your own big mouth. My wife, what does she need to do to control her big mouth?
Okay. My sister, I feel you. Thank you for doing that. I love you for doing that. It's a love pat. We call it affection and love, man. Okay.
I will let you answer that question, but let me ask you a more serious question, right?
Okay.
You started in about less than 10 minutes into your presentation. You talk about your personal life, your personal experience. You've been married for 29 years, right? At some point, you are having a sick marriage. I'll call it a sick marriage because it was not productive. You are not enjoying it. Both parties were not really enjoying it, right?
Yeah.
Then you realize that this was not going anywhere. Divorce was imminent, right? But you saw that as not an option.
No, it was an option.
It was an option, but you didn't want it that way. So give us, be more specific around that. What was the issue beyond talking, all those things? Beyond those, what was the main issue that your husband was not looking forward to coming home, right? Give us information around, we will respect the privacy around it.
No, my life is an open
marriages
book.
that are now where you are. What triggered the roundabout to say, no, we're not going to divorce, we're going to fix this? What happened, right?
Okay.
Then my last question here will be, Brother Elias, when you talk about arrange yourself, someone was so energized, right? What do you mean by arrange yourself? What does that mean? That code, right? So I asked you.
That someone was
you. Can answer my wife's question last.
Okay. So the big mouth question is last. All right. Sounds great. So what changed when we reached rock bottom? Up until that point, and I don't know if you've ever seen my videos, like I said, when I got upset, I just wanted to say it then and there. My husband, because of his, alhamdulillah, he was far more mature than I am. He's 12 years older than me. But for him, when he got upset, he shut down. He was very upset because the kind of words I use had no filter. So I take full responsibility for a lot of things. However, there was no middle ground. I think that was one of the biggest things. My husband took his time. We courted for about 3 years, and he shared this in the Naima Roberts lecture yesterday. He took his time because he wanted to be a very deliberate, very conscious husband. He wanted to be present. He wanted to be very involved because he took that long before he finally got married. And by the time he got married, he had a big picture in mind of what he believed would be an ideal relationship. So during courtship, since I was on my best behavior, I put my innocent face on, and he didn't know what kind of trouble he had gotten into. He got married to a teenager. I was 18, and I was a very stubborn teenager, enough that my father wanted to marry me off because I was a live wire. And he didn't get that part when he got married to me. So when we got married, with all my overzealousness, he was more calm, even I wouldn't say, yeah, he had better control, but when he lost it, it was not pleasant. And that I wasn't used to, which was a source of fights. My parents never showed us how we were supposed to fight. They never showed my brother and I that they fought, number one. So going in with unrealistic expectations, number one, I believe set me up for failure, because by the time we got in, everything that seemed perfect beforehand, it just suddenly changed. The moment we had our first fight, within 2 weeks of marriage, I asked for a divorce. I mean, I know I was so stupid, and I was really daft because I just thought, if we are fighting, it means the marriage is over, since I never saw anybody fight and I didn't know you fight as couples. I never talked, because I was 18, I never talked to other married people before. So he was shocked at first and calmed me down. But after a few times of the same stupid outbursts, a fight, and then I start crying and I was like, I told you I should have gone home 2 weeks ago when we fought, I returned to sender and all that rubbish. He just ignored me. The third time we had that incident, he said, Maryam, whatever you ask for today, I'm going to give you. And it's now been 29 years, I've never asked for a divorce again. But as the marriage progressed, not that it was hell and bleak and everything, but we did go through the emotional roller coaster of love, hate, contempt, disgust, yet passion. It doesn't mean there weren't good times. We had both. It was very rocky and it was unstable, and there wasn't commitment. I wasn't committed since I had divorce on my mind, which is something I want people literally take that out of your mind and just tell yourself you're committed for life. Because the moment I told myself I'm in this for life, the thought of divorce just never featured anymore. And I was now fully on this mindset and they lived happily ever after. That's what history will judge us with. So having this mindset that I'm in this for life, I'm going to be in it through thick and thin, the good, the bad, and the ugly, we're going to make it work. But I needed to mature. I needed to, my son calls it woman up, as you say, a man up. I needed to woman up and own certain things that I was doing that were affecting the relationship, making it very toxic. But my husband, alhamdulillah, when we got so low, he then finally accepted when I asked for feedback that, you know what, this is one last ditch effort. It doesn't mean before I haven't asked him, like, what am I doing wrong? What don't you like about me? But the approach was different. This time around, I had the right mindset and I was humble. And I promised myself I wouldn't talk back. If I talk, it's more to seek clarifying questions. And I took my notebook, which he knows is not like me. And I took notes and I kept jotting down and I kept saying, thank you for that. Even though it was no compliment, it hurt. It was raw, it was unfiltered. But I felt, as we here in the North would say, talk grrr. That's what happened. And he did. And that allowed for me to now go within and work on myself. But during that same sitting, and he shared this in other lectures we've done together, he said, how can she ask me for that and I not show humility to ask for the same from her? And the moment he opened up and he mirrored what I did, and he keeps saying in many lectures that I give Maryam full kudos for turning the relationship. Otherwise, it would have just continued like that till whatever ends up. But I chose to take on that role to say, let me figure out what am I doing wrong? And he responded in kind. The things I did wrong, if I'm understanding you, like meeting him at the door or calling him with my frustrations. Instead, when he comes home, I have something bothering me, I would make an appointment to fight. So I would ask him, Said, when is a good time to talk? Something is bothering me. And that changed the trajectory of any kind of conflict to be, because his mind was more open. Sometimes it would take Said about 2-3 days. And at first it used to really tick me off because I'm like, I'm upset, I want to talk. What's taking you so long? Later on, I got to understand. He said, Maryam, I needed to program my mind and be in the right frame of mind that whatever you're going to say is not going to upset me. I needed to come there ready to hear something that may annoy me, but not be annoyed. So it was like pre-programming himself. But he came and would sit me down and it's like, what's on your mind? And wallahi, it hardly ever deteriorated from then onwards. So approach in how I handled conflict made a big difference. For him, I always said, please, for the sake of Allah, if I offend you, tell me then and there. Don't hold it in, because that was something else. He'd wait till we were upset, then he would blow up and tell me things that I didn't know he was, like I'd say, he's holding me in mind, So it would give him a chance, because I always say, Said, please, I ask you for the sake of Allah, as soon as I do it, draw my attention to it, but just do it in a way that won't hurt my feelings. Just say, Maryam, that thing you did, I didn't like it. And that's how we've changed our style of fighting. So he was also kind in the words he used, unlike the way it was before. And because he was kind, I couldn't lose it. I would still maintain my good adab, my good behavior. So the triggers now started to reduce. But again, it's more about, in your unique relationship, you need to ask each other, what do you like? What do you not like? What are we not doing that we need to start? And then continue to update that list. Because like I said at the end of my talk, new things come up. We change, we evolve, we grow, and we find new interests. And so the other thing is this thing to do with interest that helped tremendously is making sure we're on the same page. One thing he had as a vision before he married me was he's going to make sure, and he said this last night during our talk, he's going to make sure I catch up, if not go beyond him. That was something that was his goal. So when we first got married, I hated reading. My husband would give me big fat books on world politics to read, and I was like, I ain't gonna read that. And so he ended up reading them to me as bedtime stories. So he started to bring me on the same page, to the same level. And eventually, like he said, Maryam, now my student came and passed me. I had to say, I beg, wait, slow down, small girl, and things like that. But till today, we still sit, and if I'm doing an online course, I will often share with him something that I felt, even if it's just a portion of the course, I'd say, come and just take this part. And because we both have this growth mindset, we are into this mutual development. My husband is taking this course called the Longevity Blueprint. He's very into being very health conscious and trying to, be as fit as he can. He just hit 60 last week. So he's constantly into, eating healthy, and I am not. I love sweet things, I love food, and it's really a battle of the bulge for me. But I obviously have to maintain. I don't want his eyes to start wandering. So I try to make sure I'm on the same page with him when it comes to fitness. And when he was doing this online course called the Longevity Blueprint, he made sure that when he started doing some of the exercises, he would invite me. Do you want to join me? He doesn't say, come and join me. He says, do you want to join me? And yes, I do, because it's more fun with company and this and that. So it's just trying to make sure you have common interests. We play together. We watch the same shows, the same comedy. We play the same board games. And he says I'm a sour loser. So when we play checkers, for instance, I get upset if he wins and I get violent, but hey, that's another story. And then intimacy. We make sure there's a lot of variety in that, because though people will say, a lot of women, or there's this myth that for men, sex comes first. So wallahi, I believe validation, making your spouse feel they matter, that they are relevant. To me, that is number one for every human being. So if it comes to number one need, if you make sure your spouse feels they are top of your mind, that they are important to you more than your family, more than your parents, everybody has their space. Everybody has the respect they deserve. And yes, our parents are meant to be honored and elevated, but you're going to have to answer to Allah for how you related with your spouse, how you made your marriage work. And it is that important. And every parent should respect that you are working on making your marriage thrive, not just work, but your marriage is meant to thrive. And I know, based on how bad and how low things got, that you can have a marriage that thrives and flourishes. So that's that.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sister Maryam. Thank you so much for that detailed response. So a couple of quick notes to the participants. We have lots of questions, so we really want to crave your indulgence that if you're going to ask your question, please go straight to the point. No tafsirs, no muqaddimos, nothing. Just go straight to the point. That's number one. Number two is, because we have lots of questions for our dear Sister Maryam, we would only take one question per couple. So you can have a discussion with your wife if you guys have two questions, or with your spouse. It's just going to be one question per couple. Let's start practicing win-win. Now, the third thing is, if your question has already been answered by Sister Maryam, please lower your hand. You don't have to repeat the same question. Jazakumullah khairan for the consideration. We really appreciate you guys' support. So, Brother Semiu, over to you. Brother Semiu, feel free to take two questions, one per couple, so Sister Maryam can answer both at the same time. Jazakumullah khairan, everyone.
Jazakumullah khairan wa yakum. So, inshallah, I'm going to start with those on the list right now. I'm going to call two names. Again, because we're short of time, go straight to your questions. We want to say our salams, go straight to your questions. So, I'm going to call on Brother Kalejai. Once Brother Kalejai is done, the Jimos, it will be on turn next. Straight to the question.
Assalamu alaikum, Sister Maryam. Barakallah fi. May Almighty Allah bless you and bless your efforts and everything, inshallah. I just want you mentioned something towards the end of the presentation that is very important, because when you look at the categories of the couples that we are here, we have the seasonal, we have the intermediate, and we have the young ones. And you mentioned the 5 stages of marriage. I don't know if you can just mention it again, and then the way out of it to improve each one of them. I think it might be very important, because I believe that is your goal and one of the key things that you want us to take home. Because
sorry, could you clarify what you mean by 5 stages of marriage?
The roundabout, hotel
parking. I get
it. And then what is the action plan to move on from that stage? Thank you so much.
Okay, Sister Maryam, please hold on. So I'm the next person, and so you can put the questions together. So the Jimos.
Assalamu alaikum, sister. So my question is about woman sacrifice, because the way you were explaining it, it looks like the woman are the one that has to do the sacrifice, especially in our Nigerian culture. We are the one that have to bring the change. And with this word of feminism that we have right now, it looks like what you are, like, I'm thinking, maybe I'm getting it wrong. It's more about submission, like submission to what the relationship is. So how can we balance that, like the spirituality, like the Nigerian, our culture, the religion, and the feminism together, that it doesn't look like we are all submitting to everything our spouse wants? I'm not sure if do you understand my question?
Yeah, I think definitely. I will start with your question. I think that's fine. With regard to, I will come back to the first question. Hope you don't mind. With regard to this concept of, woman sacrifice, definitely that is so far, far, far from what I would have ever wanted anyone to go away with, because I kept emphasizing it requires mutual commitment, mutual input, and mutual benefit, mutual output. The input is supposed to produce the right output. So if I'm putting in a lot of effort, my spouse is putting in a lot of effort, then you reap the fruits of your labor. And I made it clear, marriage is not one-sided. It's meant to be win-win. And I use terms like that. I don't use any word like feminism, because when it comes to the institution of marriage, yes, the man is the head of the household. I will not mess with what Allah has decreed. But I want to emphasize that nowhere in Islam does it say, I'm a slave or I'm a servant to my husband. Submitting to my husband's needs and desires, I see that more as obviously what has been described as part of the first things that I owe my husband is, I am your wife. I belong to you and nobody else. And I see, and I married you because I see the leader in you. And the man is the head of the household, and I am part of his flock. And today, the way I see my relationship with my husband, because of his dignity, because of his self-respect, because of his humility, his ability to show he is fallible, his humanness, his bringing me up to his level, not leaving me behind, and even acknowledging that he says in many areas she has even passed me. There is no question of me being in the back seat. He has put me by his side, as has been described in Surah Al-Rum. He has created for you mates. Your mate, think about your mate growing up. It's your classmate, somebody, your peer, so to speak. But as has been described as well, as the leader, where are you taking me? And I will follow you if you're going to take me somewhere good. And I will honor you, I will respect you, and everything to do with the relationship, if I know you are respect worthy. So I'm not saying submit if he's not being fair to you, not being just, which are part of his obligations to you as a woman. Just accept that, because he's going to have to answer to Allah for it. So I may not demand, but I will ask for my rights. I don't believe in aggression in the relationship, and it's not a tug of war. I'm not in a power struggle with my husband to say who's the boss. I look up to him as the leader, and because he has set the right example in the way he conducts himself, I'm ready to follow, because we both have a shared goal. He asks me, like the Prophet ﷺ did for shura. He consults me before taking decisions. He doesn't make unilateral decisions for something that concerns our future together. So because he has fulfilled his obligations to me, I respect him for that. And that respect he has earned, not forced on me, from me. It's not that I gave, in fact, I was not respectful to him when we first got married. So it's something that he earned because of how he conducted himself. And I am ready to go wherever he goes because he carries me along. So this thing to do with consultation has to feature in a relationship, and that's how the Prophet ﷺ did with his spouses. He consulted them. He, on many affairs, even serious affairs, when his companions were turning their backs to him, he consulted, I think, Salma, and she told him to slaughter a camel. So if we're going to use that example, then the issue to do with feminism doesn't even feature. I mean, women were generals during the time of the Prophet in the army, and the heads of markets, and in commerce and everything. So I do not use such words, to be very honest, because a healthy relationship is not about flexing muscle. It's not about, who's the boss. No, in Allah's eyes, I respect you if you've earned my respect. So I just want to clarify so nobody misunderstands what I said, and I hope that has been clear. With regard to the 5 stages of marriage, I described the first one being, or not stages, but what kind of climate is your marriage? Is it the war zone where you're constantly having battles? You're not guarding yourself. Like me, I went for the jugular. I hit below the belt. I went for maximum pain when I was upset. Like I said, I used my greatest weapon of mass destruction. So that's a war zone. There's a shouting match, there's insult, there's dissecting your spouse, making them feel small. That's the war zone. The second one is your marriage is like politics, where you play games, where you're manipulative. For me, politics is when you say, I won't allow you to have sex with me because you didn't allow me to have that. That's playing games. That's being manipulative. Having children take sides with you. Look at what your father did, or look at what your mother is doing. Things like that. Sorry. Before I forget, with regard to the lady who just asked the question, another thing that I know my husband did, if you're talking about feminism and so on, my husband actually, when we got married, told me I don't owe him cooking, cleaning, or anything, because under Sharia, I'm not a glorified housemaid. And from the beginning, before we got married, he made that clear. So my husband did, I'd say, 75% of the cooking in the house. He cleaned, he washed my clothes. We had of course, we were in America, we had a washing machine. We came back to Nigeria, we got house help. But when we were there, he took those roles, because under Sharia, either he does it himself or provides somebody to do it for me. And then he took care of the kids when he wanted to be an active, hands-on father. And he did the captain of the pooper squad, because he changed the diapers. When the firstborn came, they did it together, because he wanted him to learn how to be a father and the roles of a father, hands-on dad. So I just wanted to say that, and that's how he got the respect. Because me, I ain't gonna respect nobody that didn't earn it. But with regard to the second, I mentioned politics, playing games, manipulation, having factions, people take sides. Then the other one is hotel, where there's no fidelity. If your marriage culture is there's no loyalty, you can come and go as you please, hop to other hotels or more cheap motels, and then come back. That's the third. And the other one is marriage like a roundabout with no exit, where you just exit, you're managers, you're just managing each other. You have no goals or expectations for the marriage. And then the last one is your marriage is like a thriving garden, where you put a fence around it, you guard it jealously, you plant seeds, you nurture it, you add sunlight, water, and things that will make your marriage thrive, and then you remove weeds. Anything that will affect your marriage in a negative way, outside influence, the weeds in yourself, your own negative habits, you break them. So those are the 5 areas that I think I covered.
Thank you.
Jazakumullahu khairan.
So we'll go to the next set of questions. Again, keep it short. We don't have time. Keep it short, straight to the question, and inshallah, Sister Lemu can help us. So I'll call, so next couples are the Bellos and then the Baloguns. The Bellos and the Baloguns. Go ahead. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so the question. Okay, can I go on?
So it's actually, okay, don't worry, go ahead, and then the Bellos will go after you.
Okay, okay.
The Bellos will go after you.
Okay, so the question is, when this issue set in, you know, from a personal experience, I want to ask, when issues set in marriage and, you know, it then leads to that drift, you know, both parties have drifted. From a personal experience, how do you journey back and still make it stronger? Because this time around, we've gone, you know, so far, but how do you journey back and still make it stronger and continue to keep going strong? That's the question.
Okay, excellent. Can I answer that? Okay.
Yeah, no, the Bello should ask there, so that if it's similar, you can answer it together. We can't hear you, the Bello. Just a little bit louder, inshallah.
Okay, my question is, how do we know the obligations of each party? Because it's very important, as you said, that each party knowing what to do, what is Allah has given them to do. What are these obligations? So my obligations to my husband, his to me, what are they? So I just want you to highlight so that we know, and then, for people that know it already, they remember it, and for those that don't know it, they know it.
Sounds good. All right, I shall do everything to find the answer to that question here, because it's actually available online, but I'll get that for you in a second. So let me first, obligations. The first question is, if your marriage or the two of you have drifted apart, how do you get back together? If that is your reality, how do you come back when you have been maybe like, the roundabout, let me describe it as that way, where each person is just doing their own thing and has not been asking for anything out of the marriage. You've not had mutual goals. I think it goes back to the question, what are your spouse's endearing qualities? Is your spouse worth fighting for? Why did you get married in the first place? Is that person still there? If they are not, and the person you have with you today is somebody different, where did they go? Did you chase them away? Because these are some serious things you need to get to the bottom of. And is your spouse also interested in making the marriage work? Because that's another point. Because sometimes, like I told somebody that they said they were doing this, they were doing that, they were trying to look attractive, and everything when it comes to intimacy, they thought they did everything right, but their spouse wasn't noticing. Their spouse practically didn't notice or appreciate anything they were doing. And I said, maybe your spouse's heart has been stolen. Maybe their heart is elsewhere. You didn't notice when certain things you didn't fulfill made them go out, or they just succumbed to temptation and they had no control over their own weaknesses and unfortunately gave in to that. There's a strong possibility anything could happen. So how do you come back together? Number one, you do need to sit down. Like I've mentioned, you need to talk. You need to be honest. If you're the one who has violated trust or has done something that has made them drift apart, or were you the one who drifted apart, you need to talk and identify. You then need to do the introspect. Am I the one who did something wrong? Find out from your spouse, what is it? Is it salvageable? And then try and make sure you are conscious and deliberate and being ruthless with yourself in trying to make sure you don't do that again and regain trust. It requires baby steps. Sometimes, in spite of all your good efforts, they do not respond, or they'll wonder what you're up to, but you still have to make the effort if your spouse is worth fighting for. You can't just give up. But you do need to sit, talk, ask the real questions straight up. Be ready to ask questions and they don't ask you back. They may not ask you to give them feedback about themselves. That's okay too. The most important thing is look in the mirror and start with yourself. But if you're here today, it means you want to make sure your marriage works. You want your marriage to work. And I pray if you're the one going through this or somebody you know is going through this and they're watching, maybe your spouse is also going to have that same intention as to why they joined this session. But my hope and prayer is that you are able to recoup, recalibrate, sit down, go back to the drawing board and actually start discussing these important topics that you need to address. And one by one, start checking off. Am I working on this? Am I being ruthless with myself on these things that my spouse has said they don't like or they want me to stop? They want me to do differently. And am I ready to adopt the new things they want me to do? And is it a win-win? You're not meant to sacrifice yourself. Even Allah doesn't want you to suffer in marriage. You're supposed to benefit. Let it be mutual fulfillment. So are you also going to get something in return? So that you're not doing all the work and your spouse is there enjoying all the fringe benefits. So you need to see the light, but most importantly, you have to go back to the drawing board and talk, real, honest, candid talk. With regard to the last question that was asked, it was with regard to the rights and obligations. And I will just quickly read them off, but I just wanted to, I have it in writing somewhere so that I can cover them. Hang on 1 second, bear with me. Rights and obligations okay, let me quickly see if I can remember. I know the first one, rights and obligations, is mahir, which is the dowry, that for the husband, he owes his wife a dowry. That is whatever is mutually agreed upon. And in Islam, you are encouraged to make sure your dowry is not so high that you make it heavy for your spouse. Your spouse is not supposed to, suffer or be broken financially because of the dowry, unlike what we see in marriages today. So the next one is you, as the husband, or your spouse an allowance, something that is hers to keep, not to be shared. And what she does with it, it's her business. It has nothing to do with household expenditures, not for maintenance, not for food, not for nothing. The third, respect. You owe your spouse respect. And that is both sides, actually. This is the place where we are on the same page. So both of you will have to answer to Allah for that. So you both owe your spouse respect. Kindness, love, so those three things: respect, kindness, and love. I mentioned that before. And then a halal relationship. This one, same thing: love, respect, kindness. Halal relationship is both. All right. And then the husband owes his spouse to pursue or gather more knowledge, additional knowledge, for her to gain knowledge. So those are the ones for the husband owes his spouse. Now, the flip side is the woman owes her husband respect. First, the word submission is the first one, actually, that she submits to her husband. Respect, love, mercy. Sorry, I missed one. Justice, both of you. Security. Yes, justice and security. Sorry, I have expo because I couldn't find my notes. So my husband Said is giving me, I haven't memorized it. So security for the wife, protecting, like we talked about, being a garment protector. You both owe your spouse that as well. And then what I'll do before we are done, I will paste it in the chat room so that everybody has that. But the wife owes her husband not to bring anyone into the home that he does not approve of. And she cannot, that's the big difference. Submission, you cannot admit somebody into the home that your husband does not approve of, and you cannot leave without his permission. So I just want to emphasize all the other things. You owe your husband a halal relationship, love, mercy, kindness, yeah, I think that's it, right? Okay, so that's it. I hope that has answered your question. I promise you, I will post it, inshallah, as soon as I find it there. Jazakumullahu khairan.
Well, so I think that's what we're going to do. You can send it to us. We'll send it to everybody if it's not possible before this session ends. or you can send it to the email address that you have, and then inshallah we'll send it to all attendees, inshallah. So with the last question, please again keep it short because we only have just 10 minutes or 5 minutes to end. The Ibrahims, please go ahead with your question and go straight to the point. Assalamu alaikum. Brother Sulaiman and Sister Zaleka Ibrahim, are you still there, inshallah?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, okay. Thank you, sister, for the lecture. Very, very interesting and very, very informative. My question is, does your relationship status or your, let's say, different individual personalities affect the way your children are raised in terms of discipline and education, like formal and Islamic education? Because sometimes
repeat the question. Sorry, repeat the question.
Like your relationship with your husband before it get better or after it get better, does it affect and different personality? Does it affect the way your children were raised in terms of discipline? Because sometimes raising up the kids can be a strain in their marriage, and sometimes it can cause divorce as well. Because the husband go this way and the wife go this way, and both of them don't agree. Do you understand the question?
So does our different backgrounds affect how we raise our children when it comes to discipline and just child upbringing? Is that the question?
Yes.
Our educational background or just our upbringing?
Whatever you can put to help in terms of that.
Okay. All right. So I think I can go ahead and answer the question. Brother Mustafa, am I right? I can?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, I can give you just a little preamble. My husband and my husband talked with me before we got married about issues to do with child upbringing. And he said he is not ready to be a father. He has issues, like I mentioned before, that he wants to deal with before marriage. And he wants to make sure he's got himself in order before he brings this being that didn't ask to be born into this world. So he wants to take his time. And definitely, I didn't need him to tell me, a hot-headed teenager like me, I was not ready to be a mother. I definitely didn't want to be a parent at that stage. So around 3 years after we got married, we had a discussion, and he said he feels he has come to terms with certain things, but he can tell that I'm not yet ready. And I totally agreed. So it took us 6 years. One of the main reasons he said we are not ready, and I agreed with him, is we were still fighting. We still didn't have our lives in order when it came to issues to do with conflict and sorting out ourselves. And we did not think it was fair to bring a child into this world to an environment where there was no love, where there was conflict, where there was no peace. And we wanted to both be deliberate and conscious. So we waited. And alhamdulillah, by, like I said, it was in our 5th to 6th year, we started getting our act together. We finally felt it was time. And alhamdulillah, Allah blessed us the next year with our first son, and we have 2 boys. With regard to individuals, and everybody's background is different and unique, and there are people whose educational backgrounds are different and cultural backgrounds are different, and yet they're able to successfully raise children and be on the same page when it comes to issues to do with discipline and child upbringing. I think all this thing requires having marriage goals and having parenting goals, being on the same page, and that requires over talking and making sure you are both agreed and both committed to this thing to do with parenting. We always tell our children that paradise lies under our feet, but like Mufti Menk said in a lecture one day, that the path to hellfire lies under our children's feet if we don't do it right and get it right. And unfortunately, sometimes you find one parent being more like a single parent in the home, doing all the work, while the other parent is just a bystander or is Santa Claus almost, because they're the ones who pamper the kids, spoil them, undermine what one person is doing. You're tying knots, the other one is untying. We see that because we run a school here in Nigeria, and we see it happen a lot. Both of you have to sit together and agree. And like I said, you cannot say my method is the right one and yours is not. What you have to do is identify the ones of yours that were not good and make sure you don't replicate it with your children. And you both have to agree and be truthful. My husband said what he didn't like growing up. What he saw that were unpleasant, he said, I would never want to subject my children to this. And I had to come to terms with whatever it is I experienced or I didn't like to make sure I don't repeat history. So we have to always see ourselves as parents that we are handing on the baton. That's why I asked you, are you okay with your children replicating what they are seeing in the two of you as a couple today? Because you are teaching them what to do with their children and their spouses. So you have to just create your own marriage culture and acknowledge what wasn't good. Make sure you don't repeat it. Yeah.
Okay, Jazakallah khairan. So inshallah, I think, so a few more people to ask questions, inshallah. If the Lawals are on, I think there was a confusion the last time that they raised their hands. I think they're still interested in asking questions. So if the Lawals are ready, I will go ahead with the Ibrahims and then the Lawals, if the Lawals are still ready. Otherwise, if they're not, I'll go to the next person. I think Sister Marufa Davis will be next after the Lawals. If the Lawals are not ready, Sister Marufa.
That's Emil. Yeah, just to be a bit specific, we have lots of Lawals. So I think it's Nurain Lawal. Yeah, Nurain Lawal.
Yeah, Nurain Lawal, yes.
Yeah.
Nurain Lawal. So if you're ready after the Ibrahims, please go ahead with your question, straight to the question.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sister Maryam, Jazakumullah khair. Just wanted to ask about, you had mentioned earlier during your lecture that a lot of people get married and after 9 months they start popping babies. So just wanted to ask about that amongst each other, we both want to make a plan, you know, like about when we want to have babies. But then how also do we negotiate that amongst each other? And also, how do we deal with, you know, like we know about just forgetting what outside influence says, but, you know, from the, like our family, like in-laws perspective of saying, hey, how would you want to say, you know, like, oh, you want to wait for a certain time? Are you Allah? You know, Allah is the one that gives babies. And, you know, why would you want to say something like, oh, you're going to wait at a certain time, you know? So how do we negotiate with that? Or how do we deal with that, you know, from a young perspective?
It's a very good question. I remember after the second year, my husband started to feel more pressure. He's the first of 26 kids. So he came from a big home and he was getting calls from his mom or dad and he had to just say, you know, it's not yet Allah's time. And that was his line throughout and they thought, oh, something was wrong with us. And I remember once they had given up on us after I think our 5th year, I came back to Nigeria and somebody asked, where are they? And I was like, who? They said the twins. I was like, oh, I didn't know I popped twins. Like, all right. But if I'm going to be honest, the way my husband would talk, it's none of their business. It's your lives and you're the one who go before Allah, not your family. And so this thing to do with making sure people cannot dictate, people don't have a say in how you relate and what you do. It is your business. And what is mutually acceptable to the two of you is all that matters. But being conscious parents is such an important thing, especially in this world our children are growing in today, because you both have to be hands-on, you have to be deliberate, you have to make sacrifices. It's only now my husband and I finally can breathe and we have an empty nest. They've gone to university, but while they were home, we were very involved in their lives. We were, like I shared the stories of how my husband was involved in the washing of the, you know, the changing of diapers and all the dirty work. And he wanted to be involved in feeding the kids. So I would express milk and he would feed the boys because he wanted that same connection, that a bond that the mother normally has with the children. He wanted to go through that whole experience. So it's about intentions. I think that's it. Do you just want to have kids to satisfy, you know, or just because it's done? Or because kids can be a source of conflict if you've not gotten your act together. They can be a source of stress. And financially, especially as they grow, they become a burden if you're not ready. So you need to know that if the two of you are are fine and you've sorted yourselves out and you've synergized and are living in peace and harmony or making an effort to, then a child will not most likely come in and see things they're not supposed to see. And it's much easier when they grow up seeing love and feel the presence of both parents in their lives. I know my husband today, my oldest kid is it 23 or whatever he is, I can't remember now, but he'd spend over an hour chatting on the, on WhatsApp video calls or video calls with his sons. And I love that bond. I love, they share everything that's going on in their lives. He gets to give them advice, whether it's relationship advice, whether it's just manly advice or whatever it is. But I'm also very close to my sons and they confide in me in things that I always put my husband in a picture and I say, this one said this to me. You can take style and raise it and do leading questions that will hopefully allow them to say that to you as well. And this and that, so, but it's once you are committed and then you stay until you have an emptiness, then you can enjoy. There's nothing better than this lockdown where it was just the two of us in the house, no house help, nothing. And we started literally the way we did when we first got married. He was mopping the corridors, I was sweeping. He said I didn't know how to sweep and he was correcting the way I swept. He'd be doing the dishes, I would cook, and we took turns and it was really, really wonderful. But there's time for that. But if you're gonna have kids, be ready. That's not when you go do a degree or PhD or whatever. That's when you stay with them and you protect your kids and you guard them jealously. You don't have kids and say, Grandma, raise my children. I don't buy that. If we want to run off to Abuja just to have a weekend, yeah, that one is okay. But nobody should raise your kids except you. That's just my opinion.
Okay. So if the Lawas are available, if not, I think there's a question on that, it's like a follow-up to a question that had been asked before about cultural differences in raising children. So I'm just gonna try to read this out a little bit. So what does culture have to play in raising children, especially, maybe discipline children or teenage girls if they are, talking back at parents? And as against sooner is. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay. I had someone call somebody's name, but I think I'll continue with it. What is culture? Honestly, I think yes, culture can create a big difference and people's methods of doing things are quite different. Okay, I think a lot of the people in the audience are Yoruba and I'm Nupe, and I even use that as an example today, that we Nupes and Yorubas are very, very similar when it comes to respect and issues to do with, discipline and understanding the hierarchy. Like I couldn't just call my brother Nuru, I had to call him Ya Nuru growing up. So you have to always there's a bit of a power distance. And we go down, we crouch to show respect to our elders, and I still do. My husband and I are from the same, cultural background, so I think we were both familiar with those things, and we made sure we instilled from an early age in our children those values. And why we left America and brought them back to Nigeria to raise them is because we didn't have a community to support us. They didn't have models to see that they would emulate, so that it's like, okay, if they go to the neighbor's house and they don't greet, somebody will smack you on the back of the head and it's like, don't you have any respect? You're not representing, things like that. And I really appreciated what my mother did with my brother and I growing up, as they say, it takes a village, but there is this adage we have in Nupe, which I'm sure you have a similar one. You will love your child and overlove them, the world will reject them. And if you give your child to the world will protect it and hold it and help you raise your child well. And that's what I truly believe. And when my kids came here, nothing was out of bounds except any kind of abuse. But I did not hesitate to discipline them the way we were disciplined. And my dad, yes, he used the bulala koboko on us when we went really, really out of line. But I till today so thank him for what he instilled in us, because I know wrong from right is in black and white. There's no gray. And there are certain do's and don'ts and certain values that are non-negotiable. And issues to do with cultural differences, it's about negotiating. Nobody can say theirs is better. Because I can also say, you know, well, we know peace, and I say that to my husband, like, we know peace, we can be very arrogant, you know, that we are not humble, you know, we like to overshow this pompousness. So there are parts of our culture that is not good, that doesn't go in line with our faith. But if at the end of the day, we never allow culture to come over religion, then inshallah, raising your children the right way will be good, because your kids need to know the difference. I remember my husband sharing that his father allowed him the liberty to ask questions without him getting in trouble. And he would ask his dad, when he sees his dad doing something that he felt wasn't right, he would say, is this culture or is this religion? And his father would say, it's culture. And he'd say, is that the right one to go with? And he'd say, no, son, it isn't. So it's important we raise our kids to know the difference and have the right, you know, Allah first in everything we do, in which case, if you are to go by just examples of the Prophet ﷺ and how he raised his children and how he related in child upbringing, and he was hands-on, then inshallah, you and your spouse, regardless of your backgrounds, you will find that the color and the diversity of your best experiences and your best cultures will come together to produce something very beautiful.
Jazakumullah khairan. So it's 1:15, and you know, we've kept our, you know, dear sister this long. Is actually, you know, late in Nigeria. We also, you know, would also want to use this time for us to do other activities. I would like to say Jazakumullah khairan again to Sister Lemu for accepting our invitation and honoring us. We really appreciate that, you know, all of us learned. We would also would like to informally invite you to future events, whether it's platform, Yasri, ICARE, whatever, but we would, you know, do a formal invitation later. But I know definitely the leaders of NCNM will be contacting you, you know, for future events, and I hope you would accept our invitation, inshallah. Is there any last minute notes, Brother Elias? No?
Yeah. No, I think, again, on behalf of the entire ICARE planning committee and NCNMO, Sister Maryam, we would really, really want to appreciate your support and the lecture, the session you just provided to us. And we've actually been chasing you, no pun intended, for the past 2 years. So it took us 2 years to get you. But inshallah, as Brother Samuel said, one thing is certain, by Allah's will, one thing is certain for sure. We would be reaching out to you to join us in our future programs. And the next one that is coming up, without going into details, Sister Maryam, is the platform program. But we won't go into, as I said, we won't go into that much details, but you'll be getting a note from us. And inshallah, we would also want your amazing husband to also join you. So it feels, it's a tag team, win-win. So inshallah, so we would be
Let me show you. Let me show you. He's here.
Assalamu alaikum.
He's Sunday best, but who will take him like that?
So inshallah, jazakumullah khairan, Ustaz. We'll reach out to the two of you within the next couple of days to inform you of our next program. So we'd really appreciate if you can grant our request. Jazakumullah khairan. May Allah continue to bless you, bless your family, bless your kids, bless your school, your business, your parents, everyone. May Allah continue to bless you. May Allah make this a witness for you in this world and in the hereafter. May Allah continue to allow us to benefit from you. And then may Allah continue to strengthen the bond that we have established with you now going forward. May Allah continue to make it a source of joy to you and to us as an organization and the Nigerian Muslim community in US. Thank you so very much, Sister Maryam, and also your husband. Jazakumullah khairan.
Lemu, I just wanted to ask you one question. If you can leave us with some suggestions on effective communication, any books, any recommendations that you have that you think about books that spouses should be reading that would help to improve their marriages, and one being effective communication.
I will send you, inshallah, since I mentioned, I will do everything right now before Maghrib. I have a few minutes to go. I'm going to send you the rights and obligations, and I'll send you some reads. And let me just say, 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families is an amazing book by Stephen Covey. It transformed so much in our relationships, and I would highly encourage you to read that because it has effective communication in there. But inshallah, I will share some of my best reads on everything that I can, inshallah, with you very soon.
All right. Jazakumullah khairan, Sister Maryam.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.